Yeah.
Not even remotely close.
Yeah, that would also be crazy.
Yes, that would be insane.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Don't you want a POPGOES the Weasel of your very own that you can bring wherever you are? MyPOPGOES is now on Android and iOS. Check the link in the descriptions below to get it for yourself. Add voiceover, genuinely, this is one of the most fun FNAF adjacent games I've ever played. It's just a really fun, condensed time. I highly recommend it. Hello everybody, welcome to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the Toast, Rye Toast, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's like we always do. But we have a very special episode today. Today we're going to be interviewing Kane Carter, game developer, official Five Nights at Freddy's partner, and one of the early moderators on the Five Nights at Freddy's subreddit. Kane, did you want to introduce yourself?
That was great, especially mentioning the subreddit moderator part. That's a pinnacle of my career, to be honest.
We do a little bit of digging and research here.
Yeah. No, that was great. Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Absolutely, thrilled to be a part of this. It's been a long time since I've had any real interactions with a YouTuber or like a creator before. So no, it's exciting. So yeah, thank you.
No, for sure. I mean, it's super exciting for me. I don't know how much you know about my channel, but one of the first like fan game things I ever covered was, POPGOES 2016. I was super like, that's it's been a long time coming for my channel too. So I'm like, twiddles fingers. Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. But I guess our first question, just to help introduce everybody for people who might not be in the know, we already did the introduction, but if you were asked, who are you and what would you say you're most known for? How would you respond to that?
Okay, so yeah, my name is Kane Carter. I was the creator of the POPGOES game series, which was originally a fan game series for Five Nights at Freddy's that was initiated in 2015 on the Five Nights at Freddy's subreddit, and eventually also my own personal subreddit called 2124. And it was a good game that was made with a bunch of people around the world, people I found through the internet, basically. And the game was eventually released in June 2016, 10 years ago this year. Crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And then we tried to develop a sequel and some spin-offs and stuff like that. And eventually the game was rebooted in 2020 as part of the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, which is a kind of program thing that Scott Cawthon developed as a way of integrating fan games, 5 specific fan games chosen at the time, into the FNAF IP, into the FNAF franchise, in an official basis, really.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've developed I have been developing 3 games in the rebooted POPGOES series, and 2 of them have released now. And one of them, POPGOES Evergreen, is still in development and has been in development since, 2020, technically 2022. And that's like a big main horror game that we've been working on and off, basically. The 2 released games the 2 games that have released so far are POPGOES Arcade, which came out officially on Steam in 2022, and MyPOPGOES, which came out on Steam in 2024, and mobile devices last year, 2025. So yeah, I'm a director. I don't model or animate or program, but I design, I write, I make music, and again, I direct a team of people, a team of extremely talented people who, have been working with me since 2020. And I can talk about what kind of game it is, but I think if people are watching this,
get
probably
there.
have some idea.
No, that was perfect.
Yeah, I guess we'll get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. I guess, still rolling into the introductory phase, what first got you into Five Nights at Freddy's?
I was, of course, 2015 is when everything started in terms of making a new game as a fan game. I was there, very, very early on.
Mm-hmm.
FNAF 1, which came out in August 2015, was not, I think, I think I would have seen FNAF 1 through YouTube videos, Markiplier, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't get into the game, like, seriously until FNAF 2 was being teased. So that would have been probably October, November that year, 2014. Um, and I distinctly remember that what really got me into FNAF was seeing the teaser for Balloon Boy for FNAF 2.
Mm.
There was something about I think at this point there was an image or there were images being released, I guess on scottgames.com, but also I suppose really close to the run up of the release of the game. Scott was uploading images to a website called IndieDB, which I don't think is really a thing anymore. It might still be like a database, but I don't think it's being used by indie developers nearly as much.
Yeah.
He was uploading screenshots to for FNAF 2, and there was a screenshot he released of Balloon Boy, I think in the vents or maybe in the office, and I saw that image, and for some reason I was just like, I was mind blown by seeing a human animatronic. I was just like,
Yeah.
this game is so it's obviously we at that point we had been seeing the toy versions and maybe some wizards
Mhm.
of the characters we already knew about from FNAF 1. And I was like expecting it to just be a kind of variant of FNAF 1 where you'd see the same characters, but they'd be, they'd act a little differently because there's no doors anymore and stuff like that. But when I saw BB, for some reason I was just like, I was super excited about the game. I was just like, this is crazy. I can't believe there's a human. It's obviously still a robot. It's still like a plastic or like a porcelain enemy. But
Mhm.
I don't know. It just got me really excited. And since then, I joined the FNAF subreddit and I started theorizing stuff. And at that point, it was around 2015, 2016, I was much more prevalent as a theorizer, like a lore guy on the
Yeah.
subreddit. I also made edits. I made a lot of like edited images and animations and stuff like that. And like I said, I don't animate in 3D, but I used to make animated mock-ups
Mm.
on in like GIFs, like GIF animations and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was very prevalent on the FNAF subreddit, like you said, and eventually I joined as a moderator as well.
Mhm.
And that's where I was. That's where I suppose I grew in some sense of prevalence and stuff in the community, and that was enough for me to convince people to help me make a game
Mhm.
for the original POPGOES games.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was FNAF 2. FNAF 2 was where I kind of got into it, and I was like really enamored by the visual, the design work that was happening that
Yeah.
Scott was doing in the games.
I was, I think I'm around that time too. I think it was, I don't remember exactly which video it was, but it was either, either the first game theory on it or, one of the many let's plays that were going around on the first game. That was like the moment where me and my friends went, sure, I'll plug my laptop into the TV and we'll play it in the big screen and see how that feels. And ever since then, I've similarly been enamored with the franchise. So I totally
Yeah.
understand that sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was never huge on playing the games, but I did have
Mhm.
FNAF 2 on I had a tablet, like a fairly small like Android tablet, and I used to
Yeah.
take that to school. And I would have been literally in my final year of school, I think.
Yeah.
We call it in the UK, we have something called sixth form, which is like
Mhm.
basically year 13, I think.
Okay.
And I was so yeah, I would have been like 17 or 18 years old at this point, but I was
Yeah.
taking the tablet to school and I was playing FNAF 2 when I probably should have been studying.
Yeah.
And annoyingly, well, I don't know if this was ever fixed. I'm assuming it has been since Click Team took over with the ports, but FNAF 2, I was playing not Ultimate, I was playing just Custom Night, of course,
Mhm.
1020 mode as much as I could. And I'm pretty sure on mobile devices, the Golden Freddy enemy was bugged on a mobile, and I didn't realize this, but it was basically impossible to win. And I was
Interesting.
trying absolutely every single day to beat 1020 mode, and I'm almost certain now in hindsight that there was a bug that was making it impossible. But that was the game that I was like, that's probably the game I was playing the most, FNAF 2.
Mhm.
FNAF 3, I don't think I ever really got my head around how Springtrap worked. I know this sounds crazy for me to say as someone who works on the series officially,
Yeah.
but yeah, FNAF 3 I couldn't really figure out how to play. I probably will eventually,
Mhm.
but I have played Pretty much every FNAF game. I've played every single game, but I've just not been able to complete them very well.
That's fair. I mean, I've been
yeah.
playing the series like similarly. I don't think I think the only 420 adjacent challenge I've completed was on the first game once ever. Like I've never gotten close to 1020 on 2. I have trouble with night 6 on most of the games. So I feel you on that. Where and I've played them probably from judging from what you said, probably a lot more than you, and I still haven't been able to beat them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I mean, I'm much more into the story and the designs and stuff like
For
that.
sure. And that's not an uncommon sentiment. I think FNAF and Sonic are two of the biggest franchises of the fandom kind of exceeds the capacity of we like playing the games because, there's more to talk about than just playing the games.
Yes, I mean it's not. I've definitely come across people who simply don't play the games. But, people who are super fans. Like a lot of the artists I've worked with, or even fan artists who I just have spoken to, don't play the games. And sometimes it's because they're too scared to play the games, or because they don't have a device that plays the games very well, or whatever. But it doesn't really matter with FNAF. It is a community that seems to care a lot more about watching playthroughs instead of playing them, or just delving into the theory crafting and stuff. You don't need to play the games to enjoy it. You can probably enjoy 90% of the game's content without playing them. They are fun. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they're not. But I think you can definitely digest most of what makes the series special without needing a device that can play them or whatever. Or if you're too scared, it's not a big deal.
For sure. I mean, and you see that a lot in fandom discourse about favorite games. Is you get the sense of some people will have a favorite game and be completely in disagreement with somebody else, and often that's because sometimes it's this one's really fun to play versus I love the story that's introduced with this game, and there's different appeals for all of them for everybody in this fandom.
Yeah. Sister Location has got to be the most divisive in that regard. Sister Location had such a crazy story. It was so narrative based with the dialogue. There was voice acting.
The visuals are insane.
Yeah, the designs are so out there. They're brand new. It all feels almost like a soft reboot for the series. And then the gameplay I know was very
Custom Night's good.
Yeah, well, listen,
I think
Private Room in Sister Location is one of the coolest moments gameplay wise in the whole series. I think it's so cool that he did that. But then the main gameplay is it's not very replayable or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it's bad. I actually enjoyed it, but I know a lot of people found it impossible to replay because it's just once you played it once, you know exactly what to do. It's not even a game anymore. It's like a slideshow basically.
Yeah, I have a similar opinion of that because there are moments that it's a game of highs and lows for me because there are moments that I am fully enraptured by. I wrote a whole video just about your encounter with Ennard in the private room because I think it's such well done horror that we haven't really gotten sense that kind of horror using Elizabeth's voice against Michael. That's so interesting.
Absolutely.
But then similarly, playing through the first 4 nights almost feels like eating my vegetables before I get to my steak.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
There is nutrients to be had there, but I'm looking forward to what comes after.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, Sister Location it's crazy how much of an impact it had on the future titles. Sister Location was basically Scott's attempt at I feel like the glam rocks and the scraps and stuff like that, everything was so heavily inspired by that, and also the voice actors. My God, we still have those voice actors. They're still returning. Kellen Goff's in the FNAF 2 movie. Andy Field's still popping up and stuff. It's crazy how much of an impact it made. But yeah, you're right. It's a bit divisive in terms of gameplay. But I guess gameplay is only one part of FNAF.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of games, was POPGOES your first ever game that you had worked on?
Well, it's the first game that I began working on, but it wasn't the first game to release because POPGOES Arcade came out before that. POPGOES Arcade was an April. Well, of course, I'm talking about the very first 2016 POPGOES Arcade.
Yes.
This game came out as an April Fool's joke in April, obviously 2016, which predated POPGOES the main POPGOES game by only a few months, obviously, because it came out in June.
Mhm.
That game was made in, and I have to, I might be misremembering this, but I think it was made in about a week, and it was
Oh wow.
made and yeah, it was programmed and heavily stylistically contributed by Fiznom,
Mhm.
who went on to go on and make his own fan games as well,
Mhm.
like FNAF Plus. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
He made that game with me again. It would have been about a week or so, and that game was very much a joke game. It was an April Fool's troll game inspired
Yeah.
by FNAF World, because FNAF World had come out only a few months before that, I think, and we were just like, hey, you know what we could do? We could make a little RPG troll game, basically like a joke game. That game was full of inside jokes and references to other fan games. Like Flumpty's in that game, but he's called Dumpty.
Yeah.
There's a reference to Chester the chimpanzee and
Mhm.
some of Fiznom's games as well. Um, so that was not a very serious game. That was the first game that we released, and of course, it
Mhm.
didn't have a very good. I mean, it was released as a joke, but it was also a kind of a bad game.
Mm.
And it's not a game I'm ever going to return to. And the new POPGOES Arcade that was released in 2022 is an actual game. It's an actual fully fledged game that was, a serious endeavor.
Yeah.
But in terms of before POPGOES 2016, which was we began development in 2015, obviously, so that's the first game I ever worked on. There really was nothing else before that. I would have written stuff. In terms of creative output, the only things I really made, and this is separate from FNAF at all,
Mhm.
was music for fun, like chiptune music, really.
Yeah.
And I used to write poetry at school, which I think had some impact on like a lot of wordplay and dialogue that I wrote in POPGOES and stuff like that,
For sure.
especially now. But I never wrote books. I never wrote stories. I never designed stuff really. I used to draw, like I used to make artwork like on paper, but I never really made anything beyond that. So in terms of gameplay, no, POPGOES is the first thing, definitely.
Awesome. So as far as PopGoes goes. Anyway, what was the development cycle for that initial PopGoes game? Was there anything more or less challenging than you expected it would be?
Well, I mean, my God, I mean, I would have, like I said, I would have been 16. I would have been 17 when the game. I think I was 17 when the game released,
Yeah.
or 18 around that age. But a bunch of the people I was working with would have been way younger, because
Hmm.
I was, this is everything. Everyone was doing everything for free. I made
Yeah.
no money from this game. I tried to make money through a Patreon, but Scott took it down.
Yeah.
Completely in his right to. I'm not complaining. And the people I was working with were, gathered from the subreddit, and I don't even think Discord was invented at this point. I think we were using Skype. And
Yeah, it would have
Skype,
been around that time that people started switching over. So yeah, I think you're
yeah,
right.
I
A
think
couple years
Discord,
after would have been Discord.
absolutely, yeah. Discord, I think, I mean, I can just check my account was made in my Discord account was made in early 2016, but I don't think people were moving over until maybe mid 2016 or maybe like late 2016.
Yeah, apparently,
So
apparently, I did a quick Google. Apparently, it came out like mid 2015, but people didn't really recognize it for a couple years.
yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, we were using Skype for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and the main challenge, I suppose, wasn't at the time about really making the content, because the game was, fairly ambitious for the time, but it wasn't crazy ambitious. It was still a fairly small game, with just five
Sure.
nights and some mini games and stuff like that. But the biggest challenge was just how unpredictable and unreliable people could be,
Yeah.
because especially when there's no money involved, right? Once
Yep.
you get money involved and there's commissions and stuff like that, and there's a real incentive to complete work, things change. But back then, not only were there people who just wouldn't do what they were supposed to work on, but there were people who would be actively trying to sabotage the project, because for them that was more noteworthy to be known as someone who ruined the project. And I know that sounds
Mm.
great, like that sounds so malicious. I swear to God, that's what was happening at the time, and it's still a
Hmm.
thing nowadays. You hear about drama, you hear about people joining fan game teams, and then leaking stuff or getting into massive drama and stuff like that.
Sure.
That still happens. But back then, oh my God, it's all that happened. I went through Fiznom programmed POPGOES 2016, and once we had him join the team, that's when we worked on Arcade. But before then, we went through, and I swear to God, 5 different programmers.
Wow.
He was the 6th programmer, and
Yeah.
the reason we went through so many was because some of them would just disappear, some of them just couldn't do the work, or they found the work too daunting because it was a
Hmm.
fairly difficult game to program, I suppose.
Sure.
And then some of them, we had one programmer who literally worked on the game for like a month or two, and then
Hmm.
hold the game's files hostage unless I stepped down as a subreddit moderator. Seriously,
Wild.
we had blackmail. There was actual blackmail involved, and that's just like one example. But I mean, POPGOES 1 and POPGOES 2 that was made the next year. My
Hmm.
God, there was so much controversy, so much drama, so many people. And listen, I was also, I've definitely improved as a director, but back then I was upsetting a bunch of people with
Sure.
how bossy I was and stuff like that, and I've taken accountability for that. I've really tried my best to make amends with those people, but my goodness, the way some of them would try to deal with their problems with me by you know by trying to cause havoc, by
Yeah.
causing issues, but not just for me, but for the entire team. It was honestly every week there was something going on. I would say that was really the biggest challenge, was
Sure.
the people, trying to handle a development team where there's no money, there's no incentive involved, but you have to try and keep people motivated. You have to try to keep people working on stuff, and also try to not make them hate you and the project as a whole, so they
Yeah.
don't destroy it.
Yeah.
That was such a prevalent thing. Thankfully, with the fanverse, with
Hmm.
since 2020, there's been way, way, way fewer incidents like that. Like I
Yeah.
think the development team has been. To be honest, I can only work with adults. That's one of the I say restrictive elements of the fanverse. It's that I need to work with people who are over 18 so that they
Hmm.
can sign a release form so that we can use the work. And
Yeah.
so because that's the case, it means I've only ever worked with adults since 2020 for
Yeah.
for the games. Um, which has meant that everyone's more mature,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
For sure.
Yeah, and most people, I would say, like over 75% of the people who work on the game are paid. Some are volunteers, which is super appreciative.
Hmm.
But most of them are paid. And of course, once you involve money, there's more of an involvement of like responsibility. So that's been better. But yeah, back then, when everyone was just kind of freestyling it, it was a nightmare. It was complete Mad Max style.
Yeah, no, I
So
get that sentiment. I was on Casting Call Club for quite a long time in my like early voice acting and things like that. And Casting Call Club is a bit notorious about, it's a wonderful place to meet voice actors and directors and writers. But there's pretty much no checks on making an account. So a lot of it is like a bunch of 14-year-olds who want to voice over a Minecraft role play, So
yeah.
so like you go, the amount of projects I have joined and then have dissolved within a week is innumerable, so
I can imagine.
I fully sympathize with that feeling of when everything's kind of free and you're doing it for fun. The people is often the hardest part.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then POPGOES comes out in 2016. How did the reaction to the game affect you as, a fan of the franchise, now a part of this growing fandom of product, like producing content? How did the reaction to POPGOES affect you?
Well, I mean, the POPGOES I think POPGOES now in nowadays, because of the fanverse, is seen as one of the big guys with
Hmm.
candies and joy of creations and stuff because of the fanverse mostly. But back then in 2016, POPGOES was, I suppose, noteworthy only for having, like candies, its own original set of characters. So
Mm.
because a lot of fan games at that point, 2015, 2016, were fan games that were based on other IPs, and they
Yeah.
would go viral. And I think a lot of the virality of those games was reliant on the fact that they were based on popular IPs. Like there was a fan game for Warriors, and that would go viral because it's a horror version of a Nintendo IP, and everyone's very
Sure.
recognizable, right? There was one for SpongeBob, there was one for Mickey Mouse, and then
Hmm.
those games would go viral, and it would almost feel like, well, they were bound to go viral because they were based on these super popular IPs, and YouTubers are going to hop on them because it is SpongeBob but scary, etc.
Sure.
POPGOES and Candies, and there were some other fan games at the time that were also completely original. Those games, I think, had a bit more of a the game, like POPGOES itself, wasn't a particularly well received game outside of maybe the fact that it's a sit and survive game where the animatronics are right behind you and like they
Yeah.
don't kill you. That was unique about the game. They wouldn't kill you. They would, go around the pizzeria and try to build something that would kill you. That was pretty unique, and people appreciated that. But I think
sure.
the most praise the game got was mostly in its character designs, or the fact that they were original characters, because that was a lot of fuel for fan art, and also because it was sort of like an AU. It was an alternate reality where, because I think FNAF 4 had definitely released this at this point, so we had already
Sure.
had to tell people this was an alternate universe where only FNAF 1, 2, and 3 came out, and
Yeah.
then this game kind of has its own story where it builds upon that, and you have a new version of the purple guy and stuff. So there were people who were hopping on the POPGOES story as a kind of alternative version of FNAF, where if people didn't like FNAF 4, and a lot of people didn't at the time, especially the story, they could jump onto POPGOES and kind of start theorizing or like speculating what could happen in the future for POPGOES. Like POPGOES 2 was announced at the point.
Funny you mentioned that. I've got the next question here is actually right about that, so we can weave right into that.
Okay.
Because POPGOES is notable for when it came out as in attempting to be a part of the main FNAF storyline, taking place after 3 and only with those first 3 games. And you had to get pretty creative because most of the details, frankly, did not exist at that point in the FNAF timeline.
Right, yeah.
So obviously, we'll talk more in depth about the original plot of POPGOES, the 2016 plot. But before we get there, was the story of POPGOES originally intended to be your idea of what could have actually been the FNAF story, or had you always written it in the mind of, this is not where FNAF is going, but this is the AU I would like to take it for this story?
Right, yeah, okay. So back then, I mean, listen, I don't think anyone at any points genuinely believed that Toy Bonnie did the bite of 87. That was people mostly speculated, especially back then, that it was Mangle.
Yeah.
That was basically the accepted theory. And even nowadays, Kirk, I might be wrong about this. Has the bite of 87 culprit ever been revealed?
So the week before has a couple hints to it being Withered Foxy.
Foxy.
Yeah, and it's still debated. People still kind of lean towards Mangle. Some people lean towards Chica with the whole, UCN lines and her taking her beak off and whatnot. But there's a couple moments in the week before where Ralph looks at Foxy, or like will flashlight Foxy, and he'll be like, yeah, I don't know why that one employee tried that, or something like that. It's there's a couple vague hints that it may be Foxy. But it's still pretty unclear, never has been directly stated.
Right, okay. Interesting. Back in 2016 or 2015 as well. Yeah, like I said, Mangle was the accepted kind of, makes the most sense because Mangle hangs on the top of the she's at the top of she's on the ceiling, so it looks a lot like she kind of bites you from above, and that kind of hits the forehead, if you would. And also sharp teeth and all that. Toy Bonnie, I don't think anyone believed would have been the culprit. The only reason, and I guess this kind of spins out into the whole story of POPGOES. The only reason that I put so much emphasis on Toy Bonnie and Shadow Bonnie is because POPGOES existed as a way of making Shadow Bonnie a main villain. Because FNAF 3 has hints of Shadow Bonnie every now and again. Like there's like a mini game that kind of features Shadow Bonnie briefly, and I think there's a figurine that appears on your desk and stuff. But Shadow Freddy has a bit more of a presence because he's like the follow me thing and the mini games and stuff like that. But either way, both shadows are never really expanded upon as beyond that. I mean, FNAF 4, again, you kind of see their shadows on the show stage and stuff. But POPGOES was an attempt at making Shadow Bonnie, and therefore Toy Bonnie through the bite, a main enemy, a main villain, basically. So no, at that time, I certainly didn't think Toy Bonnie was the real bite victim, the real bite culprit, sorry, in the FNAF storyline. And also, I mean, the majority of the story of POPGOES 2016, and I suppose now, is regarding Fritz, it's Jeremy Fitzgerald being the bite victim, which I think is
Yeah.
safe to assume is still the case in FNAF.
Yeah,
I
most people
think.
agree on that.
He kind of has nightmares about the toys, which is kind of what happens in FNAF 4, but with the pre-withers or whatever the hell the bite victim has to deal with.
Sure.
And then Jeremy moves to the UK. He moves to the UK and then creates a pizzeria that kind of parallels the toy characters, but with his own character, with his own designs, the POPGOES gang.
Yeah.
And then there's also this side story going on where his brother is actually the killer. He's the purple guy. He's Simon Fitzgerald. And the reason that Jeremy was bitten in the first place is because the toys thought that his twin brother was the one who was a night guard. They thought that Jeremy was Simon and therefore should be killed. He was the predator or whatever the phone guy says. So there's like that plot twist where, oh, okay, Jeremy's brother is the one behind the murders, and it's therefore Simon's fault that Jeremy's bitten and requires, hospitalization and stuff like that. Now, and of course, the most important thing is that Simon is collecting blood from young victims in an attempt at maybe not immortality. I think that was maybe a stretch, but a kind of a medicine that could prolong life or make you stronger.
Yeah, like not immortal, but much longer than typical.
Yeah. And that's explored heavily as well in like POPGOES Arcade 2 and stuff like that. Now, all of this story, especially the whole like, oh, the animatronics have mistaken someone for someone else and therefore been aggressive with them, and then also the killer is collecting blood to get stronger and stuff like that from the murders and stuff like that. That predates what was being revealed in Sister Location by a good few months, and that was. Again, I never believed that was what was going on in FNAF, and I thought that was a bit too out there. And plenty of people complained about POPGOES' story for being way too strange and fantastical and, beyond paranormal and more into like, I mean, some people described it as like alchemy. Some people complained about it, And then Sister Location came out, and a bunch of those plot points were kind of not copied. I don't think Scott actually cared enough about POPGOES to have copied the story, but coincidentally repeated.
Yeah,
in those.
There's echoes there. Yeah,
absolutely, and it's kind of become a bit of a joke that there's a bunch of things that have happened in POPGOES that have then later happened with FNAF. I mean, you could make so many arguments that there are so many repeating things. I mean, even the fact that the killer has a daughter who haunts a character or a location, essentially, because then you have Fritz, who has a daughter, Bonnie Glade, who haunts Blackrabbit, and then there's William Afton, who has a daughter, Elizabeth, who haunts Circus Baby.
Sure.
And then it's funny, but no, it's a good question. I never really believed these things would be were an explanation for FNAF at the time, or that they would later become official. They were not predictions, they were not theories.
Yeah.
They really were just an original story.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, to go more in depth into that storyline, I'm a big fan of it. I share your sentiment online that I've seen that, while the bones of that story are wonderful, I know in making Evergreen and in doing this, you've mentioned that, for lack of a better word, there are parts that you wanted to maybe streamline, to condense other things, make slight tweaks in other places. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and be like, so what's the full plot of Evergreen? I'm not going to ask you any story beats of the new game. And we'll talk about Evergreen later on anyway. But looking at the original story, if you're comfortable sharing, if not, no worries. What are some of the things that you do look at from the original story and go, maybe that part could be a bit simpler, or maybe I want to tweak this one thing?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. Listen, again, it's going to be the 10-year anniversary this year, which is crazy. I don't really like to think about it. But it was, a different time. I was, again, that was basically my first story, my first original.
Sure.
Original is a stretch because it's a derivative of FNAF. But it's my first attempt at writing a story. And that game slightly teeters too much into a kind of surreal, metaphorical kind of thing. Like, uh, of course, there's like two layers in POPGOES where there's like the surface level thing where you are a night guard. You have to survive against a single ghost who
Yeah.
has, taken over the pizzeria, and they're trying to build that ghost a body to kill you. That's fairly straightforward. That's cool. It's basic. There's nothing. It's unique for FNAF as well, because most of most of the time, the FNAF animatronics are all individually haunted. So that was kind of cool. But below that, revealed through the mini games and the phone calls, there is this weird, surreal, like dreamish, like dreamlike story going on,
Sure.
where you have the animatronics are actually not just characters in a pizzeria, but they are also dream catchers. They're like these metaphorical pedestal, like totems, effectively, for Fritz Glade, who is Jeremy Fitzgerald. For people who don't know, it's just a new name he has in the game. They are like these totems to fight nightmares he has of the toys. So, like individually, like toy Bonnie is a nightmare that Fritz has, and he builds POPGOES to metaphorically fight nightmares of the toys, or toy Bonnie specifically. And also the whole thing with with these dream catchers fighting nightmares is a second attempt, because he also originally built Strings, who was a dreamcatcher specifically built to fight the puppet, who was successful at defeating the nightmares of the puppet.
Yeah.
And he then tried to make a second dreamcatcher. Listen, I'm trying to make this sound convoluted because it is convoluted. I'm not going to go into it because it's just so.
No, you're good.
difficult.
I remember when because I did a whole theory video on it, back when I first started my channel. And I remember there was that moment where I'm like, I know the basic story of playing through it and like understanding where Simon fits in for the most part and all this. And then there was this one moment where, because again, not very good at the games. I didn't unlock most of the extras on the menu. Naturally, I had to look them up. And there was that moment where I saw Strings for the first time. I'm like, wait, what? And then then it started I went down the rabbit hole,
Yeah. I mean, listen,
pun not intended.
Strings, yeah, very funny. I want to bring this up now, actually. 1 second, because when POPGOES first released, the game was fairly difficult to beat, especially the impossible night, which is basically the 1020 equivalent.
Sure.
And also, most importantly, the secret ending for POPGOES 2016 is so tricky to figure out. And it was designed, we literally designed the game so through like random chance images and stuff like that, so that it was something the community had to band together to figure out. It was never expected for one single person to play the game and figure out as they were going along how to get the secret ending. That was never intended.
Yeah.
You were supposed to work together. And bear in mind that was kind of a normal thing for a FNAF fan game to
because that was also a normal thing of early FNAF anyway. Like, it's not expected that one player would see every death minigame in FNAF 2.
Exactly. Right. So that was the expectation. However, soon after POPGOES 2016 released, the game was data mined. Someone figured out, someone file dumped the whole game, all the images, and that included the extra screen, which had Strings and Simon. And Simon's initial reveal essentially was through this completely out of context file dump. And Simon was heavily berated. The design was heavily criticized on the FNAF subreddit at the time for being this completely out of place, strange creature, like just a weird monster, a purple skeleton creature. And he's a bit of an out there design for sure. But once you have context of what he is and how he makes sense in the story, I think it's a lot less egregious. And he never had that chance for a lot of people. A lot of people were exposed to his design and Strings through this out of context image online. And I can imagine for you, as you said, you never encountered Strings naturally through the game by beating impossible mode or whatever. You saw it on Google. I don't blame you at all. But obviously, without the context and without understanding how things could theoretically fit in, it's a completely different character. It's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
So Strings originally I mean, I've always loved the idea of the protagonist of the game being a robot. I thought that was really cool, and I don't think
Sure.
that's by itself that out there, to be honest. I mean, we've had that now with official FNAF games, I think, but
Hmm.
or kind of. I mean, Michael is like a cyborg, I guess. Um,
Yeah, he's a weird. Some
I don't
people
know what
argue
you'd call
security
him.
breach for playing it as a robot. Some people.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, so true. Um, so so yeah, I mean, the execution of how you reveal these things back then, it was very
Hmm.
difficult and unpredictable. But in terms of like how we'd improve things or like how I change things, I can say I don't think this is a scoop or anything like that, but I'll reiterate it here. The whole Dreamcatcher thing. I'm not saying strings as a robot or whatever won't or will or won't return. That's like one of the one things I've said I will never confirm. I said
Sure.
before, like Simon the robot does return, but in a new way, very, very new way.
Hmm.
Some things don't return, like the Lux animatronics and Gravestone and Gemstone, which are
Sure.
mostly like Easter eggs or like trophies essentially for the original game. They don't return.
Yeah.
Strings is something I'm not going to confirm. He may return, he may be different, he may not return, or whatever. But the whole Dreamcatcher side story thing, you can safely say is not coming back. That is, or
Okay.
if it comes back, it will be in a kind of a very, very different take that's a lot more easy, a lot easier to digest, or like it makes
Sure.
much more sense. But the whole like metaphorical dream stuff, no, that's not coming back. The game is much more um, literal. I
Sure.
suppose most importantly as well is that POPGOES Evergreen, um, everything is possible to find in the game. There are things you need to figure out, and there are puzzles and like story beats you need to digest and kind of discuss with people. But every single answer is in the game, discoverable or outright told to you as the story, as like the campaign story kind of goes on.
Okay.
Um, so there's not going to be a need to decipher things or like there's no arg, there's nothing that's going to be explained through outside of the game. That was
Sure.
also a bit of an issue with POPGOES 2016. Some things were so poorly explained in the game that I had to explain it later on Reddit comments and stuff like that. And for a lot
Hmm.
of people, that was like the primary source, just me, a person on Reddit, which completely ruins the immersion of the game.
Sure.
That's a massive flaw of how the first game was executed. In Evergreen, there is so much data. There is so much stuff to find or
Hmm.
unlock. Um, and then those pieces will then be possible to collect and form a story out of basically. Or like there's side stories, there's like B plots and C plots and stuff like that you can
For
figure out.
sure.
Um, so yeah, I think that's probably the main thing that's improved. Or like been changed or removed. It's the really metaphorical, surreal dream. Like it is very dreamy. It's very strangely like Fever Dream.
Hmm.
The side stories in POPGOES 2016. That's all, taken more literally in Evergreen.
For sure. Yeah. That was one of the aspects that like I remember. Um, I think one of the benefits of the original Pop Goes game is that like it was really the dream catcher motif throughout a lot of that was a really interesting way to explain the creation of those animatronics, but it was separate from the story in a way that a lot of people either didn't know or
Yeah,
they would play through it and be like, oh, okay, well, I get that, and then wouldn't look further into it. And I think it really helped to explain the creation of them, but I agree with you in the sense that it's like a little hard for some people to grasp.
yeah, you can do it better. I think we've done it better in Evergreen.
Sure.
There's this is not like public, but in the game once you play it eventually in 2029 or whatever. Um,
Mhm.
the whole origin and the creations of the animatronics and stuff like that is very cool. I mean,
Sure.
I have everyone on the dev team who knows everything about the story, and
Mhm.
we don't have everything. Again, Evergreen's still not early in development, but it's not finished or nearly finished.
Sure.
But I've given the rundown of the story and the improvement of the improved versions of parts of the story from the original game to the development team or the internal development team, because there's some people who work externally who don't need to know everything about the story. So
Sure. Yeah, you gotta
it's better
keep
to
that close
prevent
to the chest.
exactly it's better to prevent leaks and stuff like that. So we have like maybe 10 people max who know everything about the story. But I've
Mhm.
also spoken to some feedback people, some people who are very trusted, who are super fans of the original game,
Yeah,
to get their opinion, because they're obviously so attached to the original game, and I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to make it,
sure.
so they prefer the original, because that's a case for a lot of games and a lot of movies where, a reboot happens and the original is better. And they love the new version. They prefer the new version. It's way more straightforward. It's much more interesting, and the characters feel much more realistic, and the motives are better. Like Bonnie Glade's motives were kind of very strange, especially in the POPGOES 2 continuity. That's
Mhm.
different. She's much better now, and Simon the robot also has a very, very, very cool story and motive and stuff like
For
that.
sure.
So yeah, I think it's better. I think we'll see what people think, but the story is maybe the part I'm I don't know, most confident in, because I also think the visuals are way better than the original game. But I am happy with the story, and I think that's going to be a thumbs up. It's because it's the part I'm most involved with. No one
Yeah.
else really contributes to the story. Of course, many
Mhm.
many many people contribute to the visuals and the programming and the gameplay, of course, because I have a team that work with that. But pretty
Sure.
much everything that's happened with the story has come from my head. So I think I'm most proud of it. A bit like with POPGOES Arcade 2020, or 2020, 2022, I suppose. Um,
Sure.
that game is probably what I'm most proud of, because it's the only game that I've managed to contribute the visuals towards. Like I
Mhm.
make I make I made all of the I made like 99% of all the sprites for that game, and that game is a
Mm.
pixel art game, so it's mostly sprites. So Evergreen, I'm a little less attached to, in terms of like my involvement, because it's also something that so many people have contributed towards, and of course I'm super proud of them, and of course and the project itself as a whole I'm proud of, but it's the story that I'm most attached to, I suppose, and I think
For
people
sure.
people will like
Yeah.
it. I think.
Awesome. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, that's like your baby. Like I totally get that. And speaking of the story, we kind of touched on this, but just to out of curiosity, Blackrabbit is such an interesting antagonist. The way that POPGOES is set up, none of the actual animatronics can technically hurt you. You have the panic attack thing, but as far as correct me if I'm wrong, the game's internal logic, the animatronics aren't hurting you. They are trying to create something that can be possessed that will then hurt you, Blackrabbit. Now, obviously, Blackrabbit is incredibly linked to Bonnie Glade. This is more out of my own personal curiosity as a fellow writer. But did the idea for Blackrabbit spawn after you thought of the story for Bonnie Glade, or was Bonnie Glade's story kind of inspired after you thought of the idea for Blackrabbit?
So POPGOES, the original pitch for POPGOES
Mm-hmm.
was made in, geez, it would have been like a few weeks after FNAF 3 released, because uh I mean, I've told the story a bunch of times, but I'll say it here. FNAF 3 came out, and the general consensus that people had online, or at least on the FNAF subreddit that I was frequenting, was that if there were to be a fourth FNAF game, it would have to be a prequel, because FNAF 3 bookends the series story. The idea was that FNAF 3 had to be the end chronologically. There couldn't be anything after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point, people assumed that Springtrap was completely long gone. He's burned in the fire, and that was meant to be the end. And people were obsessed with knowing more about Fredbear's Family Diner, or the
Mm-hmm.
pre-withered location, that kind of thing, right?
Sure.
So there was this consensus that FNAF 3 or FNAF 4 had to be a prequel. So I made a pitch that capitalized on this theory that there couldn't be a sequel. So I tried to make a story that would be a sequel to FNAF 3, something that could happen after FNAF 3. And I made this pitch image that was really quite awful in terms of visuals, but it was a pitch of how gameplay could work. And the enemies that were presented were POPGOES, Sarah and Saffron, the squirrels, Morse the mole, no Blake, and no Stone. Basically,
Sure.
Blake and Stone kind of spawned as a split of Morse later on. So
Mm-hmm.
those four, and then Shadow Bonnie.
Mm.
And Shadow Bonnie was supposed to be a physical creature, or a physical entity, and that it was meant to be 3D printed from POPGOES. And there was an expansion of this pitch that was Something along the lines of a USB stick, like a memory stick, was left at an auction for for the Fazbear's Fright location or whatever,
Sure.
and that it was haunting or like corrupting arcade machines. There were in the POPGOES Pizzeria location, and then the arcade machines would corrupt 3D printers, which would print Blackrabbit. So
Gotcha.
that was before there was any incidents of Bonnie Glade. There was no daughter. There was no human characters involved at all, I guess, unless you count maybe a really early primitive version of Fritz Glade. I don't even know if he was Jemmy at this point. But
Sure.
there would have been, someone who purchased the USB and arcade parts or whatever from the Fazbear's Fright, and then their custom location, the new location, the POPGOES Pizzeria, is then kind of taken over by Shadow Bonnie, which I suppose is
Mm.
similar to how Glitch Trap works in Help Wanted, right? It's like it's like this haunted software who
Sure.
takes over the location. So yeah, that was pre Bonnie Glade, and then later on, through discussions on my subreddit and stuff like that, or like Skype, there was a discussion of bringing in Jeremy Fitzgerald from FNAF 2, and then his daughter, who haunts the location after being killed, and she was killed because she wore a mask that resembled Toy Bonnie, and he killed her because he has fears of Toy Bonnie. So
Mhm.
yeah, that was later. Blackrabbit was predated Bonnie Glade, briefly.
For sure.
I think that answers it.
Yeah, no, that was exactly that was a question. Yeah, I was just curious about that. Genuinely, I could talk about PopGoes 2016 and that whole saga for the next 3 hours, but we probably should move on. We're encroaching the first hour mark, so we'll move on to the fanverse at large. So
Okay.
we already touched on it a little briefly at the beginning of this and kind of went over it. But for a lot of people, the Fazbear Fanverse initiative is something that for a good chunk of the fan base, they really only pay attention to when something they already knew about and were looking forward to comes out. So for the benefit of folks
Yeah.
at home who either don't know what the project is or have not been keeping up with it or have not been paying attention, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, the Fazbear Fanverse project was Scott's attempt to help fund creatives and bring them into the franchise officially, to help flesh out the grander universe of Five Nights at Freddy's, which essentially is a shake of the hand, an initial, here's some money to get you started, you're officially related to FNAF now, go off. Am I correct in that assumption, roughly?
Yeah, nothing of that was incorrect.
Mm.
There's extra bits here and there, but that
Sure.
was pretty much how he presented it on Reddit, on the
Yeah.
original announcement and on the subreddit. But yeah, no, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Awesome. And we touched on those initially 5 projects. A lot of people don't realize how many hats you wear. So just for those people who aren't aware, how much involvement do you have in the various Fazbear Fanverse games?
So obviously, as it was announced on the initial announcement on the subreddit, POPGOES was announced as one of the series, and he doesn't in the post. Scott only really mentions POPGOES Evergreen,
Sure.
but at the time, and this was like before the announcement, and it was all very very well confirmed internally and stuff. POPGOES Arcade was announced before the fanverse, and it was already a part of the fanverse. And it's unfortunate that he never mentioned POPGOES Arcade in the post, because a lot of people seem to think that Evergreen was something that was, agreed upon with Scott, and that I was supposed to develop Evergreen as a priority, and that I decided to just randomly make Arcade, perhaps after that, just as like a kind of distraction or like a side thing, which is not true. It's not even close to being true. Arcade was announced before Evergreen, publicly, and it was a part of the deal from the very start for the fanverse.
Yeah.
And it was a priority up until the Steam release in 2022, and then beyond that, that's when we started focusing on Evergreen. So that already is something worth pointing out. Arcade was always a part of the fanverse, and it was the priority for 2 years. We still worked on it here and there with Fighting Chance and stuff like that. But
For sure.
yeah, that's annoying. It has been annoying to have to constantly reiterate that, because unfortunately Scott just didn't mention it in the post. It would have been nice if he just said Arcade and Evergreen, but whatever. It's not a big deal.
Sure.
Later on with the fanverse, we also had MyPOPGOES. MyPOPGOES was announced, or it was released, and shortly after its announcement in 2023. It was an April Fool's release. It was not a joke game. It was not a troll game, but it was an April Fool's thing, because I like to do something for April Fools every year if possible.
Sure.
And then That was initially released for free on Game Jolt, just like Arcade in 2020, and that was released for free on 2023. And then later on, Scott, shortly after the free release, Scott did ask me if it'd be possible to expand upon that game for a paid fanverse inclusion, a proper game for the fanverse, basically a third POPGOES game.
Sure.
And that game was developed, here and there while the fanverse deal was still being decided, because it was kind of a difficult thing to add a game to the fanverse at that point.
Yeah.
And it was then in 2024 decided by Scott to be a part of the 10-year FNAF anniversary, and it was the first game. It was the first thing that was released for the FNAF 10-year anniversary in 2024. So those are the three POPGOES games that I've been a part of. But I have been, I've dipped my toes in all of the fanverse titles. So literally every single fanverse game that was, at least officially announced. So that's Candies, that's The Joy of Creation, that's FNAF Plus, and Flumpties 3, or the Flumpties series, I suppose. I have been a part of mostly just feedback, mostly just helping out and giving feedback and giving ideas and things like that. Some more than others. Like I'm actually on the title screen for Flumpties 3, which is very cool, because I gave like a suggestion for a major accessibility option or something like that. So I did test that game early. I was given plenty of things early for FNAF Plus and Candies 4. Candies 4. Emil's very, very close to the chest with that. He's very private with Candies 4. But my girlfriend and I have worked with him before on a game called Chef Wanted. And even before that, we worked on something that I've never announced, and we're probably never going to announce. But we did work with him on something else, and that's like 2017, 2018. So we've been close friends with Emil for like 8 years, and so we're pretty close with Candies 4 as well. We've given feedback and stuff like that. And then The Joy of Creation, we got the demo early for that. For the Office, for the fanverse release. I'm not as involved with The Joy of Creation. I know that Nixon has his own like team of feedback people, but I'm not really a part of that. But I have been, here and there in terms of helping him out with some stuff. I've helped him out with some logo work. I've helped him out with some story feedback and stuff like that. So there's not really a fanverse title that I haven't been somewhat involved with. Which is great, really. It's very fun to be a part of it. It's nice that everyone sort of trust each other, in some regard. But
for sure.
I don't really know. I don't really know how else to add to that, really. I mean, I'm involved with other things. The fanverse is not the only thing I work on, so it's not just games that I develop and stuff like that. Like I have tried to work on stuff for my online presence outside of games. I've worked on some YouTube series or YouTube videos and stuff like that. I'm not really a YouTuber. I don't have a long-term YouTube kind of career.
Sure.
But I've tried my best to make a name for myself through other side projects. Like last year I did a mascot horror video essay, which was like an hour-long video that I took a good month of my time off to work on. And I've also been doing a Team Fortress 2 fan project for like the past 3 years, and that's been like a big long-term project. But yeah, for the fanverse, I kind of get involved as much as I can with other bits and pieces to help people out. I also help other companies out, like U2's. And not people know this. Not many people know this, but U2's. I'm kind of like I'm a person that U2's like to speak to for feedback on figures that they're working on. And even sometimes, well, at least once, give ideas to make new products. New products. Sorry. For example, the Haunted FNAF U2's line was conceptualized by me for U2's. So there's some other companies as well that like to come to me, like Click Team. They come to me for stuff like that. But yeah, I think that at that point I'm kind of stretching it out, so I'm going to leave it there.
Right, no, that's awesome. Now. I don't want to get you in trouble, and obviously, a lot of things are held close to the chest, so I'm not going to make you talk about anything in development or coming up wise with any of the other projects. So we're gonna kind of laser in as far as right now on the POPGOES projects within the Fanverse. We'll start with POPGOES Arcade, which is, you know, one of my favorite FNAF related games. I enjoyed it, you know, quite a lot more than a couple of the mainline games. But anyway, when redoing the arcade series, and when like really nailing in on POPGOES Arcade and giving it, you know, this whole fresh go to everything, what were some of your main objectives? Because, you know, obviously this is drastically different from the initial POPGOES Arcade from 2016. And, you know, I'm just curious to see what your thought process in the development of this title was.
Make it fun. That was a huge issue with the first POPGOES Arcade, because again, it wasn't really made with the intention of it being a serious title or something people actually want to play more than once. It was just kind of like a joke to go through. And then POPGOES Arcade 2, which came out in 2017, that was meant to be teasing POPGOES 2.
Sure.
POPGOES Arcade 2 was fairly significantly better than POPGOES Arcade 1. It was a little more serious. It was a little more like a serious venture of like, let's try and make something that was at least a little bit fun to play.
Sure.
It also did have some unique mechanics, but it was mostly it was mostly a simple turn-based, you attack, then the enemy attacks, then you attack, then the enemy attacks. Some items, some very basic boss fight like mechanics, I suppose, but it was very basic still. Still major step up from POPGOES Arcade 1.
Yeah.
And then with POPGOES Arcade 2020, and this was the original release that was only the Dead Forest and the very, very basic version of the Dead Forest before Fighting Chance. The game is still very simple just to start off with, and that was one of the biggest complaints that we did address with Fighting Chance last year, is that you start off the game really basic, but as you get to the second half and you start to unlock new abilities, the game does get strangely complicated in certain encounters, where you do end up figuring, like, there's a genuine consideration about how you approach fights or how you approach items you have to purchase. And this is obviously the absolute bare basics for an RPG. But bear in mind that for a FNAF game, the only other RPG we have is FNAF World.
Yeah, which is something.
Yeah, I mean, listen, some people love it, some people hate it. It's a strange game. It's a very unorthodox RPG game, but that's like the only other like alternative, essentially. So with POPGOES Arcade, the main goal was make a game that would be genuinely fun to play, and that you would want to replay after beating it, hopefully. And also to present two distinct layers to the story and to have them both be interesting. Because there's obviously in Arcade, there is one main layer, which is Dead King Freddy. You know, there's an actual story within the world of the forest where you play as POPGOES the Weasel.
For sure.
Where there is a forest that is being corrupted by a paranormal force, essentially, and you need to save it in a very kind of generic Legend of Zelda, Princess Peach, just a kind of generic adventure RPG story. Yeah. But we also need to make it somewhat interesting. We have to have the enemies look cool. There has to be some influence, like some it needs to be fun. It needs to be interesting enough that we want fan artists to actually have a go at making designs and stuff like that. There's a lot of fan art of Dead King Freddy, which is great. That's absolutely, that means I think we succeeded at least in a little bit. And then we went even harder. Oh, sorry, and then there's the second story. The second layer of the story is that on top of this forest story, where there's POPGOES having to save the world, there's also the arcade cabinet itself is haunted by a ghost. And you can discover the ghost, and you can talk to the ghost, and you can free the ghost. And once you reach the machinist, the second chapter, there is again two new layers. There's another layer where you are now having to save Menorah, who's been kidnapped, and then there's also the second layer of delving into the internal software of the arcade machine to find even more about the paranormal side that was in the first chapter. So what we have to do is make all four of those stories, the two surface level and then the two deeper paranormal level, I suppose, interesting, and worth discussing and worth theorizing and worth kind of like looking forward to figuring out at the end of the game. And then also making the characters interesting and cool in terms of their designs and their gameplay mechanics, and makes the game fun. Again, I would say like Fighting Chance makes both. Did you play Fighting Chance?
Yeah, I actually have a question on it up ahead, but yeah.
Okay. So Fighting Chance makes the first half of the game a little less boring. I suppose the first half of the game is a little simple because you only
Sure.
I mean, listen, we were trying to design the game so that it starts off simple and easy to learn, and then you get new mechanics added onto the game later on, as you know.
Yeah, you don't want to flood somebody with like 17 mechanics the moment they open a game.
Yeah, you don't want to be overwhelming. So it starts off really basic, and then near the end of the game, like near the end of the Machinist, you have like 7 things that you couldn't use in the first 10 minutes of the game. Which and bear in mind that the mechanics are introduced so gradually that you don't get overwhelmed. You do learn them as they come in, which is great.
Yeah,
I mean, I've never heard anyone complain about that part, which is great. So yeah, I think that's mainly it. We just want to make sure the game's fun and interesting enough to justify playing it and sharing it with friends and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I've played it plenty of times. When it first came out, the updated version with the Machinist, when Fighting Chance came out. And before we go into that, because I had a question on Fighting Chance, but we're about to just, hey, quick warning, go into pretty heavy spoilers. So if you have not played POPGOES Arcade, I really recommend you do. It's in the description. Go click that. But there's this wonderful moment to experience blind that I really want to discuss. And it's the reveal at the end of The Dead Forest. When you have that last moment reveal of Blackrabbit essentially reaching through the now you're forced to realize diegetic arcade screen that you've been playing on this whole time. Was that always the plan for the game, to have this diegetic arcade machine that is important and not just a visual flair? Or is it more along the lines of, as you're, rounding out the game of, well, we have this arcade screen already, let's utilize it, right? Like, what was kind of the thought process going into that?
Well, that moment where Blackrabbit kind of reaches out of the screen was in the original 2016 version as well.
Yeah.
So and that game, yeah, like you said, it always had this in-universe arcade cabinet that you would always see, and you'd always see the joystick moving around, and it would kind of feel quite immersive, I suppose, in that you felt like, oh, I am a customer at the pizzeria messing around with this arcade cabinet. So, yes, there was always the plan that at the end of the game we would tease Blackrabbit, because the original POPGOES 2016 game didn't really serve much purpose in terms of teasing teasing POPGOES 2016. Like there were no characters apart from POPGOES who would return. I think the other characters were in the game as like save points or something like that, but they never really talked or did anything interesting. Nowhere near as much as POPGOES 2020. So the main teaser, the main thing that connected that game to POPGOES was Blackrabbit at the end of the game. So the like very early discussions, and again, this game only took around a week to develop, so it wasn't like a crazy brainstorm session, to be honest. It was just like, how could we tease this? How could we make this game a functional teaser? And the idea was, well, Blackrabbit can just appear, and Blackrabbit could be a hallucination or a jump scare that just kind of like appears out of nowhere. I mean, she could even like come from the side of the screen, like from the side of the arcade cabinet, like from the pizzeria itself. That kind of happens in POPGOES Arcade 2 with Springtrap. Spoilers, by the way, but that's even cooler in my opinion.
Yeah.
But we settled on Blackrabbit needs to escape from the screen. Now, this obviously does not canonically happen. Blackrabbit is a physical thing that's 3D printed later on in the story. She's printed by POPGOES in the pizzeria later on. So the idea that Blackrabbit escapes the arcade cabinet is a hallucination, and you could maybe chalk that up to the soul of Bonnie Glade initiating a hallucination in the customer, basically showing the customer what is going to happen in the future, That seems basic enough to me. Fine by me. I'll accept that. So, the jump scare of the okay, well, in 2016, Blackrabbit reaches out of the screen just with her hand. You only see the hand grab the ledge of the screen, like the bottom rim of the screen. She grabs it. You hear a metallic thud, and then the game ends. In 2020, you see Blackrabbit's face. You see Blackrabbit, like, I think both her hands come out. She literally smashes through the screen. It's way more involved. It's way more cinematic. But a little fun fact, and I think I mentioned this a few times, but the original 2016 version, where she only grabs the ledge of the thing and then the screen cuts out, is based on, and I'm going to say more than inspired by, it's literally based on a YouTube video called Username 666. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I don't believe I have.
So Username 666 is a very old, like I would say at least 15 years old, maybe even closer to 20 years old. It's like one of the OG like creepypasta screamer videos, I suppose you could say. It's a super disturbing video editing experiment by someone on YouTube, where the idea is that there is a secret user on the platform on youtube.com called 666, or maybe it's called Username 666, and there's this video where someone goes to this channel and keeps refreshing the page, and as the page refreshes each time, the page becomes more and more disturbing and like visceral and gory. It's a very creepy video, and it was one of my favorite videos growing up. Like, I was like 11 years old watching this video and being absolutely traumatized by it. I thought it was terrifying.
As you do on the early internet, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. This is the thing. Back then, there were the culture of scaring people on the internet was so there were so many attempts at scaring people. Like, there were screamers, there were like these shock websites and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I still have that mazes layout etched into my brain.
The scary maze.
Yeah.
So Username 666, at the end of the video, the person, the viewer, the person recording the video is obviously all fictional, but so whoever we choose to believe is the person watching, watches a video uploaded by Username 666, and at the end of the video, a hand genuinely escapes the border of the video, and that's like the jump scare. That's like the end of the video. That's the climax of the experience,
for sure.
And if you watch that video, you will see how similar it is to Blackrabbit's hand, and it's not a coincidence. Like I said, that is literally what we based it off of. And I always found that video to be one of the most disturbing things online. So when we were trying to figure out how do we make this ending really quite disturbing and like unsettling to a person playing, especially if you're playing the game by yourself in the dark, the game is not a scary game. The game is completely innocent. It's a silly little RPG where you play as a pixelated weasel. And you it really lets your guard down, right? Because the game is so innocent. And then you encounter these little hints of Bonnie Glade's soul through these glitchy sprites and stuff like that, which really gets you like on edge. It's not like you realize, it's a horror game. You still think it's an RPG game, but there's some, there's hints of creepiness, a bit like Undertale. Undertale's not a horror game, but there are definitely creepy things in that game that can kind of put you on edge, right? So once you get the jump scare, it's supposed to seriously make you, soil yourself. And it does for some people. For some people, it's really scary. For some people, it's just kind of cartoony and it doesn't really feel very scary. I think 2020 does a better job in that regard. But I mean, I think the second scare in The Machinist of 2020 is maybe the scariest thing we've ever done. That's way scary in my opinion. But But no, good question. It was always the case. It was always the case that we would have a jump scare that comes out of the arcade cabinet. That was why the arcade cabinet was always visible.
Awesome.
It was so that there was a layer to break.
Yeah, it is such a striking visual. I love, playing with a medium like that. It reminds me of other examples. I know Shipwreck 64 plays with the 3:4 medium a couple times, and it's something that always will, or like Kinito Pet will play with your desktop itself very often. It's always a very good way to grab someone's attention, to catch them off guard. And I know that's one of the things that stuck with me for a long time, was that little hand popping up, like, oh, hello, and just it recontextualizes the whole thing in an instant.
Well, listen, the idea of having a game within a game, where you have like a layer between you and the gameplay, is something that has returned in a ton of my games. Because it's not just the arcade games, but MyPOPGOES also has this, where you have a toy. You have a screen in front of you, and you're not playing MyPOPGOES. You're playing as Bonnie Glade playing MyPOPGOES.
Yeah.
Right?
Having that separation, because a lot of people who will play the game will immediately dissolve everything into the game, not realizing there's diegetic parts of that.
Yeah. Outside of the game, there is other things around you and stuff like that. Yeah.
For sure.
It's not just that either. I mean, Chase Animatronics, which is another game that we released, is another game where you play as a person on an arcade cabinet. And that was heavily. How much do you know about Chef Wanted and Chase Animatronics?
I don't know much about Chef Wanted. I know about Chase Animatronics.
So Chase Animatronics was a mini game in Chef Wanted originally. Chef Wanted was cancelled, and so Chase Animatronics was released as a standalone thing because we had basically finished that, so we may as well. But technically, because it's a mini game within Chef Wanted, or it was originally in Chase Animatronics, you are technically playing as Freddy from Chef Wanted.
Oh, okay.
On the arcade cabinet. Of course, that's completely lost, and you don't need to know that, and it's obviously completely missing in the full release of Chase. But technically, it was, and so therefore you are technically playing as Freddy, because you would have in Chef Wanted, you would have been playing as Freddy Fazbear, going through a bunch of basement levels in Freddy Fazbear's, and you'd be fighting pests and collecting ingredients throughout the warehouse and stuff like that. And you would have been finding these arcade cabinets and then playing on them. So it's just another. I'm just saying it's another example where you are technically playing as a person playing a game rather than playing it yourself directly.
And I mean that also gives leeway for more fantastical elements of the story. If we want to look at, like, in the literary example of something like that, you look at Frankenstein, which when you conceptualize that story, you look at it and it's not just the story of Dr. Frankenstein and his monster. It's the letters of a sailor written to his sister about a guy who joined on the ship, that guy being Dr. Frankenstein, who's relating the story his monster told him when he caught him, right? Like, it's this, and once you have those 4 layers, suddenly anything can be in that story, because, who's to say where down the line the fantastical elements entered in, and it grounds it and like makes it more fantastical at the same time, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that these are games within a game, it means that we now have a black skeleton bear with a scythe is technically now an official FNAF character.
Yeah.
Like, that's absurd. Of course, you would never have that within the normal FNAF universe. POPGOES the Weasel, the animatronic, would never stand next to a skeleton bear. But because we have this opportunity to play a game within the game, we now have these, like I said, these fantastical elements, these like paranormal, ridiculous, cartoony things, like the new puppet design in Fighting Chance. Again, that's another puppet variant, but it's of course I don't know if you know the true story behind the puppet in Fighting Chance. It's absurd. If you were to ever have that in the actual FNAF timeline, it would be ridiculous. But because it's a game that Fritz developed, it doesn't have those restrictions anymore.
Exactly.
But still, technically, it's a FNAF character. It's just like Chipper in FNAF World is a FNAF character.
Yeah.
Chipper cannot possibly. I mean, L Chip exists, I suppose, but the actual metallic Terminator Chipper is a FNAF character, and you could technically get a Funko Pop of him. If they ever made one. I don't think they have, but they could make one.
Sure.
But of course, there is no requirement of it being a serious thing within the FNAF universe. So that you're absolutely right, where that was a very fun opportunity for us in arcade, where you can just have these ridiculous characters who don't have any bearing on the story. but they can have a very cool design and very cool dialogue, and so you can get fan art and maybe merch them. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, exactly. And speaking of Fighting Chance, pretty recently you released this major update for POPGOES Arcade, which added one of my favorite features you can add to any game, which is essentially like kind of not gambling, but risk versus reward, right? And that's built into the combat system. It's an overall combat refresh. I am curious. The update was pretty major, and there are story beats within this update. Was this update always planned? Was it, developed in response to fan feedback? And if so, was the introduction for story beats with that update, was that just an opportunity,
So the original idea, okay, I'm gonna have to try and remember the timeline here, but
Sure.
we were trying to, it would have been like 2023, 2024, where we decided like, okay, right, it's time to ship this game off to consoles and mobile. But there was something along the lines of like there were some issues that Click Team had to fix with the game, but then we were saying like, hey, we may just reprogram the whole game in Game Maker so that it's easier to port. The game was originally programmed in Click Team, just like
Sure.
the FNAF games, and then Click Team were really sure. Click Team really wanted us to stick with Click Team, their programming
Sure.
language, obviously, so that they had an easier time like understanding it and stuff like that. There was something along those where there was the end result was that Emil and I were going to fix things for the Click Team version of the game, so that it was easier to port. And throughout that process, there's a video that I've released for Fighting Chance that explains this better. But anyway, throughout that process, we were like, we could improve the game. We could probably fix up some things and make the game a little more future proof, because we don't want to release the game technically as a new title for consoles and then have people complaining about things that we know we could have done better. Like we know,
Sure.
like we don't want to hear people. We don't want to hear the same feedback we were hearing 4 years ago again, because people are now playing it for the first time. Like they play it on Xbox and go, "Hey, battles in the game are pretty repetitive," and we just have to go with them. Like, yeah, we know, we've known for years. Like that feels like a failure. So we were adamant at fixing the game's battle sort of loop. So I suggested initially the idea of making each enemy in the original game, each of the corrupt animals in the Dead Forest, have a slightly unique gimmick. And I mean, like the idea, like one idea was that the hedgehog enemy in the Dead Forest would actually deal some damage back to you if you dealt damage to him because he has spikes. That was like one idea, where each enemy would have a slightly unique gimmick that wasn't a total overhaul of the battle, but just a kind of basic, like almost like there was a permanent item that was always kind of active when you fought them. And then that evolved into something called auras. We had this thing called battle auras, where instead of it being a thing that was tied to each enemy, there was just a random chance that there would be an aura that would affect the battle, a bit like let's say like a weather effect in a Pokemon game, or like a terrain effect, right? So that was something that would be very similar to how to what eventually turned into the gifts, the battle gifts. And then we decided to recontextualize that into the gift mechanic, where you would have the chance of, you'd have the choice of opening a gift. And so it became it turned from an aura where it was guaranteed, like you just have to deal with it, into this thing where there was a choice where you would get the gift. If you open the gift, you were not able to escape the battle anymore. And bear in mind as well that being able to escape battles that early on in the game was also a new thing of Fighting Chance. Originally, you'd have to unlock the ability to escape, and now there was a chance to escape, a bit like Pokemon again, where you would have to gamble, like should you risk trying to escape, and if you fail, you're going to have to take damage. So there was the idea like, okay, you get to open the gift if you want, but you won't be able to escape. So that already is a bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
And then we were like, okay, this is an opportunity to finally add the final missing, like, primary FNAF character, the puppet. So there was already years before this plenty of people asked me, would there ever be a third chapter for Arcade? Because plenty of people consider Arcade like their favorite FNAF game ever, and they wanted more from that story, from that world.
Yeah.
And I've always said, like, no, there would never be a third chapter. There would never be a third, like in terms of chronological like story. There would never be an expansion of the story beyond that. But if I were to ever add an update, not a chapter, but an update to the game, I had this idea of something called the Ultimate Custom Fight, where you'd be able to encounter the puppet. He'd obviously be a new character you'd be able to encounter maybe in the post game, beyond the machinist ending, and you'd be able to customize a gauntlet of battles where you would your health would never obviously between battles in Arcade currently, whenever you complete a battle, your health is reset and you're back to full health. So the idea was that you would fight enemies back to back, where you'd fight them. You choose how many enemies to fight or which enemies to fight, and you would fight them linearly. What's the opposite of simultaneously? Sequentially.
Sequentially,
yeah. You'd fight them sequentially, and then see how far you can get. And it would be it would basically be like a custom night, but it would be a custom fight, and it would be the puppet kind of as like a antagonist. Like he'd kind of be like the mastermind behind this system, and he'd also bring enemies back from the dead. Enemies who you've already previously defeated, including the robots, and it would kind of feel like, oh, it's like the puppet is literally a puppet master, and he kind of has like the whole give gifts, give life thing. That was like the original idea with bringing back the puppet. And then when we were coming up with this battle gift mechanic for Fighting Chance, we were like, hold on, gifts, the idea of being able to open a gift to have a good or bad effect, this is a fantastic opportunity to add the puppet as this new kind of mastermind behind the system. So the puppet was then added as a NPC, as your next door neighbor in the inns. Throughout POPGOES Arcade, and then his story was developed as this bizarre creature, a completely insane. I don't want to spoil anything because this really is something people need to discover themselves. But for sure. A very interesting side character, an optional character, basically to kind of explore and talk to a lot. But that's kind of how it went. It was originally kind of a mix of ideas. Originally, the aura concept, and then also the Ultimate Custom Fight, and then we kind of just merged them together into Fighting Chance, and it came to be how it is now.
Yeah, no, that's kind of exactly what I was curious about. The idea of an update this big with this much story, and like kind of it seems more like it was we have the opportunity, let's bring in this stuff that we've been kicking around, and kind of legitimize them.
It was mainly because we wanted to make sure that the project, if we're going to release it a second time on consoles and mobile, we don't want it to be a version that's half-assed. We don't want a version that is something that we can't be proud of, like permanently. We want this to be we just wanted it to age well. We just wanted it to be something that we can't look back on and think of how we could improve it. And that mindset, this constant thing where, I think we could do that better, was eating away at least at me for at least 2 years, I suppose, since Machinist released. So it was an opportunity, and it was pretty major, and it did take a long time. And not a lot of that time was not because we were working on it like non-stop. But it was also because Emil was working on stuff with Candice 4, and we were doing stuff with Evergreen. It was kind of like a side project again. But and also there were these obstacles with how the game would be published and how it would be ported, and and I mean, since Fighting Chance release, and I think Fighting Chance came out in like July or June last year.
About then,
we have since been working on MyPOPGOES on the mobile port and stuff like that, but also Arcade has been going through the port process. A lot of the port process is not necessarily the actual programming side of it, because bear in mind that Arcade and MyPOPGOES already had controller support on launch on Steam. So that's pretty native to the console ports. Like there's not much work there. It's mostly a case of publishing it. It's mostly a case of like getting it approved, getting all these companies like Nintendo and Microsoft and Sony to approve the game, to get the pages ready, to get the age rating sorted.
For sure.
It's proper convoluted stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But we are, it's almost done. We are really trying to get it out this year. We'll see how it goes. It's really out of my hands at that point. Fighting Chance was what I had control over.
Yeah.
And then once that's done, I don't know.
It's
pretty
the
much
paperwork that we gotta cross our fingers for.
Yeah, and that's another person's job, basically.
Yeah.
So I can't really give much updates on that regard. But once I do get information, I will share it.
For sure. And, you touched on MyPOPGOES there. Most recently, you've released MyPOPGOES, this Tamagotchi-inspired side game for the franchise. My first question is, when did the idea for MyPOPGOES first come about? Because it seems very distant from the rest of the franchise, yet fits perfectly within its logic.
Yeah. So first of all, the game is not inspired by Tamagotchi. How dare
Really?
you? It's inspired by a different toy called Pixel Chicks. Google that. You'll see how similar
I'm Googling
it is.
this. I don't think I've heard of this.
Yes, Pixel Chicks is another toy that was released like in the mid-2000s.
Okay, I see the inspiration.
Yeah, I bet you can. It's very
immediately.
Yeah. And that game was kind of like a virtual pet, like Tamagotchi.
Sure.
But instead of a pet, it was this human girl who had like her own hobbies and stuff, and you'd be able to take her out and go to the shopping mall and stuff like that. I don't think I ever had a Pixel Chicks, which makes sense, I suppose. I think my sister might have. I'm sure we had one in the house. I don't think it was mine. No judgment though, of course, if I did have one. But I was always completely blown away by the technology of this toy. Okay.
Yeah,
So
looking at it, it's
carefully,
crazy to see that like clear LCD in front of something.
Absolutely. That was the mind-blowing, just is so creative. Obviously, at some point, someone at I think Mattel is who made this toy. Someone saw an opportunity that technically LCD displays, even ones on like a calculator, technically they are transparent just by default, and you can theoretically put a void behind it. You can make something go behind it, like obviously in the case of Pixel Chicks, an entire little plastic miniature house.
Sure.
So you can have a character walk around the house by having it sandwiched between some things in front of her and some things behind her, and it looks like she's walking throughout the house. And I thought it was genius. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Now that was one side of it. That was one side of my POPGOES, conception. But then there's also another side of it, and that's that technically my POPGOES is very much based on a troll game, or like a game that basically a POPGOES fan made a game called My Pet POPGOES, and it's this really, really rushed, quick little click team game where it's like a resource management game where you feed a little POPGOES, or like a SFM render of POPGOES from 2016, a very, very poorly made on purpose little joke game where you'd feed him pizzas and fizzy drinks and music. And I was like, hey, if you don't mind, I'm just going to make my own version of this, but I'm going to make it an actual game. I want to make it an actual fully fledged game with a story and a setting, and it's going to be a toy made by Freddy Glade for his daughter, and and he was fine with it. And we basically adopted that idea into something official, or into something like professional, basically.
For sure.
And then that was based, and then of course the Pixel Chicks design is the inspiration for the toy, how it looks, and the gameplay mechanics where there's the resource meter and stuff like that is partially based on that original Joker game, but also based on FNAF, like music boxes, basically.
Yeah.
And then all of those 5 mini games. The alternate game modes that you get in the Steam version. There's fishing, topping juggle, longest POPGOES, pest control, and Whack-A-Rabbit.
Yeah.
All 5 of those are inspired by different games outside of FNAF. The fishing minigame is of course based on generic fishing minigames where you kind of like a crane game where you move a hook and then you drop it down. But it's also based on, and this is a deliberate inspiration, it's based on the Wanted minigame from Super Mario. So in like New Super Mario Brothers DS, and maybe even Super Mario 64, the Wanted game where you have to find a character in like a bunch of character heads flying around the place. The idea that you have to find not just a fish, but a specific fish amongst dozens is inspired by that. So I thought that was a pretty unique. I don't know if that's a thing that already exists. It probably does, but I thought that was deliberately inspired by Wanted from Mario. And then there's also Topping Juggle, which is based on a Game and Watch game. There's Longest POPGOES, which is obviously based on Snake, but the important distinction with Longest POPGOES is that you only have 3 buttons, so you cannot move up and down like traditional Snake games. You have to turn left and right, which was very frustrating for some people, but also refreshing for others. So whatever. And then there's Pest Control, which is kind of like a Dance Dance Revolution like rhythm game kind of thing. There's no rhythm involved, but it's like a typing mini game, I suppose, where you have to type the arrows in the right order. And then lastly, Whack-A-Rabbit, which is just whack-a-mole.
Sure.
So yeah, that's like there's MyPOPGOES is essentially like a culmination of a bunch of inspirations, some on a more serious level and some just jokey, kind of like just cool references and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it was a very good vessel to explore some of POPGOES' history, because a lot of POPGOES' story is set in the future. Oh, it's not the future anymore. When we first made POPGOES, it was the future.
Sure.
2024 is when POPGOES takes place. Same with Evergreen. And then POPGOES 2. And if we ever made a sequel to Evergreen, it would be even further in the future. It would be a sequel. But we never really delved into the past. The closest we got was POPGOES Arcade 2, which was based in FNAF 3 2023, which is still in the future. It was. So MyPOPGOES is an example of really delving into Bonnie Glade's history, because not only do you play as her, playing a toy that Fritz made for her, but you also get to delve into her diary. There's, her diary entries. We discovered that she's actually the one who created the POPGOES characters, and then Fritz then made them into animatronics later on. Yeah. And you also look into her history, her opinions, her relationship with her father and her mother, and also her grandmother. And it's just a very cool vessel to explore this time frame. And I also, have nostalgia for this setting. I'm roughly Bonnie Glade's age technically when she dies in Evergreen, or in Arcade, I guess. And then also when she's young, or like when she's kind of like a 10-year-old in 2008, I would have been 9, I think. So yeah, I'm around the same age. So yeah, it's nostalgic. It was a cool opportunity to explore the toy, the Pixel Chick style toy,
for sure.
And yeah, it's been great. It's fun.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I know I played it when the first version came out. I played it obviously when the Steam version came out and all that. A quick reminder, folks. We already said if you haven't played Arcade yet, play that because we talked about spoilers. We do probably might mention spoilers, but it's still good to check out not only MyPOPGOES on Steam, but don't forget in the description, MyPOPGOES is on mobile, so you can play it and it fits really nicely there. So go and check that out. All the links are in the description for that. But yeah, I remember I won't specify what, because since the game still is very fresh, I want to leave that hidden, but I will say I still remember seeing one of the secrets near the end of MyPOPGOES was a big, like, as somebody who had been following the story for a long time, well, that was a big moment for me. I was like, oh, okay, I see I see where we are right now, like right, I immediately clogged, like, oh, we're here right now. Okay, I understand. And I thought that was particularly well done. So yeah, and like you said, exploring the past in that way.
Indeed. I mean, that I think what you're talking about was a teaser for something we will also explore in Evergreen. Like that's the whole point of it being in MyPOPGOES is because it is actually a kind of snippet of something that is explored later on. It's not just in MyPOPGOES for the hell of it. So sure. Yeah, it is exciting, and Evergreen does explore the past in some pretty special ways. Of course, the whole game is set in the future, but I keep saying the future. It's set in a modern era,
Yeah.
but it is, of course, it's all about Fritz and his history, and he was the bi victim, and he was heavily involved with Freddy Fazbear. So it's an interesting way of exploring the whole FNAF timeline, and of course, some people don't know this, but it is worth mentioning that POPGOES is in a shared universe with Candies.
Yeah.
Candies is a part of the POPGOES. It's called the CPU, the Candies and POPGOES universe, and Candies does also make some slight appearances in Evergreen through these kind of exploration, the exploration of the past. That's not a spoiler. It's I'm not saying Candy himself appears. That's not true. But the kind of history of the Candies world is kind of touched upon. And in fact, it's worth mentioning that Candies is also mentioned a few times in MyPOPGOES. There are some connections already. So it's interesting. It should be exciting for people.
Yeah. We're getting to a point later in the podcast. We've touched on pretty much everything that's currently out, the fanverse and the state of it. Before we move on to what's next, it's a question I love asking people. It's a question that a lot of people love discussing, and that is that it's a very fun speculation. The fanverse is settled. Scott has never mentioned bringing on anything else. I don't think he ever will. But it's always a fun little speculation that, hypothetically, if Scott were ever to add another fan game to the fanverse, what would those people talking about it want it to be? What fan games out there, if given, a bit more funding and just a chance to shine, what would their picks be? So I'm curious if there's any non-fanverse games out there right now that come to mind for you when you think of that question, because I know I have a couple.
Yeah, I mean the FNAF fan game scene is a bit unpredictable. I mean, there has been some attempts to bring other fan games into the fanverse. I mean, this seems pretty public at this point. There has been, there's been a few. The one that's obvious is Afton Built. That one unfortunately fell through for several reasons, I think.
Yeah,
and then also there was. It seems to be discussions that a game called Chompers was going to be considered, which also fell through for perhaps even better reasons.
Yeah.
And there's definitely been some other discussions behind the scenes, but I don't really think there is a chance anymore. But in a perfect world, if things were to start up again and Scott were to be, if you were to consider it, there are two games or two franchises or series or whatever that I've thought have always been, decent and decent additions because, first of all, Garrett McKay is a fan game developer who worked on Fredbear's Fright. He worked on Fredbear. He worked on Fredbear and Friends Left to Rot. He worked on, perhaps most importantly, he worked on a game called A Bite at Freddy's.
One of my favorites. That's one of my picks.
Yeah. A Bite at Freddy's is one of my favorite non-fanverse games ever. I really struggled to play that one at first. I really found it quite confusing. I was one of the early testers, and I think things changed and it was better on launch. But even despite that, I think it's so clever. I think it's so visually stunning. I think it's such a unique feel because it also doesn't really take itself too seriously. It's kind of like a jokey game as well. Like the character designs, obviously they can attack you and they are jump scared, and you do get jump scared.
It evokes that 90s sense of horror comedy in a way.
Yes, I think that's also capitalized on by Flumpties. It almost feels like a 3D kind of Flumpties game, where it's kind of got Flumpties attitude, but it's also super Scott. It's super accurate to Scott's modeling style. Garrett's always been really good at this. For people who don't know, Garrett is basically the main 3D guy for Evergreen. He's super involved with Evergreen and the POPGOES series as a whole. He didn't do anything for MyPOPGOES, but he's been, there from the start. He also worked on POPGOES 2 2017, so he's been around for ages. He's one of my top dogs. He's a very, very trustworthy guy. I've had no issues with him. I don't think anyone's ever had any issues with him. He doesn't really talk much, which I guess helps. He's super free of controversy, so I don't see any risk in him being added to the fanverse because he's already a part of it. He's a part of Evergreen. You know? So I would vouch for him. I've already vouched for him. I think there's one main setback, and that's that. Well, aside from Scott seemingly not really being interested, which is fair enough. I think at that point I don't blame him at all. But the main setback technically is that his games, at least now, like A Bite of Freddy's, is made in a program called Godot or Godot or
Mm,
whatever, however you pronounce it.
yeah.
And that program or that programming language is notoriously difficult, if not impossible, to port to other platforms.
I
It's
see.
very, very, very difficult, and that might have changed, but I've checked like within the past year, and it's like you need not only like it's not only just like a software thing, but it's also like a licensing thing. It's
Mm,
very, very difficult, and unfortunately, because the fanverse, because like the main benefit of the fanverse is that I guess that you get ports and merch and stuff like that. To have one of those perks be basically impossible is a huge kind of like
yeah.
setback. So I don't know if that's even considered like I don't know if it's even worth it really. It would still be nice, and he's still like my number one pick. If
Mm,
there was a way for the games to be reprogrammed in like Game Maker, and if you were to also remaster those previous games, Fredbear's Fright and Fredbear's, I think it's called Fredbear's Fright, Fredbear and Friends Left to Rot. Fredbear and
yeah.
Friends Left to Rot has aged slightly poorly, but it is still some people's favorites. It's still one of those like favorites for some people. It was one of my favorites.
Mm,
Like a remaster of those games, and then a Bio Freddy's. That as like a series, like a Garrett collection, would be huge. It'd be an amazing selection.
yeah.
Um, and then a second pick that I've always thought would be a really good pick, specifically for being a different genre, is the glitch attraction. The
Oh,
glitch
yeah,
attraction,
yeah.
yeah, I know very little about the developers. I don't know if there's any controversy I'm missing here, but from what I know, I think the developers are from Spain, so it's another little region to cover because
Mm,
we have like so many people from different countries. Like I'm from the UK, Emil's
mm,
from Denmark, Nixon's from the Netherlands, but I think he's also Italian. I
mm.
think he's Italian, but he used to live in the Netherlands. Fiznom was American. Oh no, sorry, he's not. He's Chile. He's Chilean. He's South American.
Mm,
And then there's Jonachrome, who is American, North American.
mm.
Um, and I know technically only three of these people remain: me, Emil, and Nixon. But it'd be cool to just have another person from a different country.
Yeah.
I think they're Spanish, but also the Glitch Attraction is a completely different genre. It's an
Yeah.
escape room game in a 3D environment, but it's mostly in like a kind of closed off environment. Like you kind of have like one room that you're kind of running around in and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
and also it's a game that takes advantage of all of the FNAF characters. FNAF 1 to I think Ultimate Custom Night, like
Yeah.
or at least says like maybe FNAF
Like,
6.
yeah, FNAF 6, Ultimate Custom Night in a way, because there are references to Ultimate Custom Night in the FNAF 6 area,
Yeah,
So, like, but what is a reference to Ultimate Custom Night if not a reference to anything else in the franchise?
I know, unless you count like Fredbear, I guess, because he's
Yeah.
only in that game. But
Um,
yeah, I think the Glitch Attraction just feels like a very fitting fanverse game. Obviously, I have absolutely no power to add a game to the fanverse,
well,
and
yeah.
I've mentioned these two before. But in a perfect world, that I think those two seem like a good fit to flesh out the roster a bit. Now, I
Yeah.
will say, and this is something I've only kind of mentioned, here and there on like Discord messages and stuff like that. There are possibilities to expand the fanverse through the current developers.
Mm,
Scott's like apprehension to expand the fanverse is mostly, from my understanding, I'm not going to speak on his behalf, but from what I can
sure.
tell, is in terms of adding new developers
Mm,
because there has been so many failed attempts and that it seems like no one can behave themselves.
fair.
But adding new games to the fanverse has
Mm,
always been a possibility. It's already happened since launch because we obviously have MyPOPGOES and Fnac
sure.
Fur.
Yeah.
But I will say, behind the scenes, I have been working on pitches to add new games to the fanverse that are unrelated to POPGOES.
Mm,
So I've come up with FNAF games that are small but fun, like side games, I guess, like kind of like Chase Animatronics. The Chase
sure.
Animatronics came out, and that was not a PopGoes game; it was a FNAF game. And there was already discussion to expand that game into a fully fledged, like a maze chase campaign game where you'd actually explore different series, like different entries in the series. Like Chase Animatronics just has Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and
Sure.
then the puppet in the final level. I always had this idea with Emil. and my girlfriend who worked in it as well, obviously because it was a Chef Wanted spin-off, was to expand that game into a version where you'd have FNAF 1, where you'd have Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. You'd have FNAF 2, where you'd have the toys and the wizards. FNAF 3 with the Springtrap and the Phantoms. And they'd all have their own mechanics tied to those games. So FNAF 1 games, the FNAF 1 levels would have the doors. The FNAF 2 levels would have the flashlights. FNAF 3 would have the phantoms, and they would like be able to walk through walls and stuff. So that was already an idea of fleshing out that game into a Fanverse title, and that could happen. In fact, there has been work behind the scenes to potentially make that happen, and then I would eventually pitch that to Scott and see what he thinks. Once, when I added my POPGOES to the Fanverse, there was an additional initiative made to make it easier to add further games to the Fanverse. So Scott, at the very least, is open to the idea of at least me being able to add new games. It hasn't happened. I've never been able to pitch one yet. But I can tell you and your viewers that I have had discussions and little teams set up to make multiple pitches.
Awesome.
So the Chase reboot is one of them, but there are others. And there's one that was technically spearheaded, like began late last year, so not long ago, like a few months ago, and that is pretty close to being ready to pitch. So I have no idea whether that will ever happen. I have no idea if Scott accepts it to the Fanverse, but just to get people's hopes up a little bit, that if they want more games in the Fanverse, they want more games to be, ported on other platforms or get merch or be on this official kind of level. It's not impossible. It seems to be impossible in terms of new developers, but new games, again, it's already happened. Arcade and FNAF MyPOPGOES and FNAF already were added, and I think it could continue. I also don't even think, this is my opinion, I don't think that Emil and Nixon are going to be done. Like, I don't think they're just going to disappear once their games are out.
For sure.
I think Nixon's made it Nixon has given the impression that once the joy of creation is out, he's done with FNAF, and that could be true. I'm not going to speak on his behalf, but I think there could be more, even potentially with the two of us. Maybe that could be fun.
Yeah. And talking about like things that are down the line for the Fanverse in general, we've gone over what has come out, what hasn't, what is behind the scenes could happen, but for anyone not in the loop, obviously not talking about dates or release schedules or anything like that. The games come out when they're ready. What projects are still in the works to come out for the Fazbear Fanverse project? Because obviously, like the ones we've mentioned, there's Evergreen, there's Joy of Creation, there's FNAF 4. But are those the three that are still being developed and on their way? You've mentioned FNAF 4 is a thing that's happening? ? I for myself and the viewers, what is still on the way?
So Evergreen is still, it's now, aside from having to communicate with port process stuff with Arcade and MyPOPGOES, that's the priority for me. And recently, like within the past month or two, there has been some pretty major updates behind the scenes. But I'm just going to shut up about it. We do like to give teasers, and we like to release new images. Like I said, I will have a new image for you to show off for your stream exclusively, a writer's exclusive. But in terms of updates on what the game or what we're working on in terms of progress, gameplay, I just don't think it's even worth showing, because it's just either you show too much and some people complain that we're showing off too much, or we show too little and people complain that they're not getting updates. Listen, Emil gets away with not showing off anything, and I think and there's and I say get away with because there aren't that many people vocally frustrated with the lack of updates. For some reason, we get way more of that flack with Evergreen, even though we've released 2 games. Again, I'm not throwing shade at Emil. He is working hard, and he shows me updates for what he's working on. And from my understanding, he is working on both FNAF games. He's working on Candy's 4 and FNAF Fur. He gets burned out very easily. He has trouble with motivation. It's like an actual psychological thing he has suffered from. I think he's been more public about that recently, and it's very difficult to to pull an update out of him, because it is a case of a mental thing for him. So that's just out of order, really. But in terms of what's like actually guaranteed to be coming, the Evergreen is our next POPGOES game, and then there's ports and stuff. The Joy of Creation seems to be something that seems to be basically guaranteed to come out this year. I would say I would like Evergreen to come out this year. I can't promise that. It's not even really in my control, because I have so many people who work with me who can just disappear sometimes. And I can't really control them. They're not slaves, so sometimes that will happen. So the Joy of Creation seems to be the safest bet for what's coming next, in terms of announced stuff that could be releasing. If we manage to successfully pitch something to Scott, something new, there could be a completely brand new secret thing coming out this year. Maybe. Again, no promises. I have no idea. Scott hasn't seen this thing yet, so there's no guarantee. For FNAC, I think the most likely thing to come out next is maybe the Candy's DX games. So for those who don't know, there's FNAC Fur, which is a platformer game, which is kind of like expanding on the Candy's Adventure game that was in FNAC 3. Because plenty of people loved that minigame, and Emil, I think it's safe to say Emil enjoys making retro style arcade kind of games more than the free roam 3D style games. I think he has more fun with making 2D visuals than 3D. So I can't blame him. Of course, we made arcade and MyPOPGOES, so I kind of get where he's coming from. So I think there's FNAC Fur is maybe more likely to come out before Candy's 4, maybe. That would make more sense, because I think it kind of teases FNAC 4 in a way.
Sure.
But before both of those, Candy's DX. So the DX games are supposed to be kind of remasters of Candy's 1, 2, and 3 that are not just supposed to be like cleaned up versions of those games, the removal of the copyrighted content and the references to YouTubers and stuff like that, but also they're Steam releases. They're like paid Steam releases that are going to have achievements. I think so. Anyway, trading cards, Steam items. That was the idea that I think was pitched to everyone on GameDrop. They are meant to be full-on Steam releases that you could actually play Candies on Steam and experience all those goodies that come with a game being on Steam. So I think, Joy of Creation would probably be this year. I don't know if we're going to get another demo. I would doubt it. I think it's more likely that the game's just going to come out maybe near the end of the year. It could be delayed to the year after. I got no clue.
Yeah, games take a while. It's always a thing of like, when they come out when they're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Joy of Creation seems to be like the highest quality FNAF game ever. It's crazy how polished that game is.
I remember playing the demo a couple years ago. I was like blown away.
Yeah, I mean, like Evergreen, in terms of like what each different Fanverse game offers, Evergreen I think is focusing by far the most on a seriously fleshed out story and like world building. But the Joy of Creation is going to be the scariest game of all time, man. That game is going to be the scariest FNAF game.
Yeah,
it's like I don't know what can come close. FNAF doesn't really in terms of the official mainline games, they are scary. Like the Secret of the Mimic was, I think, way better than Security Breach.
I think most people agree with that.
Horror. Yeah, but I think the Joy of Creation is going to be where people go to get scared. Streamers are going to love it. It's going to be crazy. So that's like this. I think that's probably this year, maybe next year if things fall through on that. And then Evergreen hopefully maybe this year, maybe next year. FNAC 4 again. I've got no idea when FNAC 4 will release. And then there could be some secret things coming out as well on the way.
Awesome.
There's also merchandise happening. I know some people get really excited for merchandise. There is some stuff planned. Jazzwares have been brainstorming the idea of doing some Fanverse stuff. I know Aaron from Jazzwares has been talking about that on publicly as well. There's some stuff from U2's coming. I have been speaking to a company since 2023 about the idea of maybe getting some new merch made that is mostly based on printed stuff like shirts and posters. Hopefully that happens this year. I've been really hoping that would happen. But I think that covers it. I think that's mostly it.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm mostly excited about potentially brand new stuff. I know some people are going to be annoyed, like, oh, you're working on stuff apart from Evergreen. Listen, that's how every indie developer works. There's a main game, and then there's side stuff that you hop between. Okay, you hop between the side stuff because you get burnout with the main project, and then you learn new skills from the side project,
Yep.
so you jump back to the main one. So listen, these side things that I could be pitching to the fanverse that have nothing to do with PopGoes, they are designed to be more accessible because they are not tied to PopGoes. I understand that with PopGoes, they don't PopGoes games can struggle to sell because like especially MyPOPGOES on mobile. That's the thing, we've been really struggling to sell that game because I know that they seem to appeal to people who are already in the know with PopGoes. People kind of don't see them as entry level games. They are. You can absolutely play MyPOPGOES as your first PopGoes game.
Yeah.
But I totally get that there are some people who just don't care about fan game characters, like characters that require their own kind of effort to get into. So I've been interested in trying FNAF games, games
Yeah.
that have nothing to do with PopGoes. So we'll see what happens. That could be good. We'll see.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, at the end of this, is there anything we haven't covered today that you would like to either clear up or something that you're excited about you wanted to mention for fans of the franchise?
Only because it's like a fairly big platform. It would be good to clear up some misconceptions about the fanverse in general,
Sure.
because some people seem to have a very strange and incorrect conclusion of how it works. So the fanverse, and I've said this before on Twitter and stuff, but the fanverse is not a job. The fanverse is not a contract for us to complete work. It is not a guarantee that these games will release and that we are being paid to make them. That's never been the case. So Evergreen could get cancelled and I wouldn't get in trouble and I wouldn't lose money. I would lose potential money. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
The fanverse is a license to reward us if we make something.
Yeah.
So that's like the main motivation for us to get the games completed. The games are not meant to be completed because we get in trouble if we don't, and we are not on a payroll. Some people seem to think that we are dragging out the development of the games so that we make more money by getting like a monthly paycheck from Scott. That is not it. We are not like Steel Wool. We're not a company with a job. Like we initially got funding. As you mentioned on his Reddit post, we got some funding to kick things off. I've spent all that. That's gone. We were not given that much. Like someone said on Twitter we were given $100,000. Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even remotely close.
Yeah, that would also be crazy.
Yes, that would be insane. That I obviously cannot give a number, but that was not it. That was not the number, and the amount that we were given. Obviously, I worked. I think Nixon started off his games as a solo developer, but then he started hiring people to work with animations and stuff. But I was always a team. I've always worked with a team, and I always worked on multiple games. So I lost money very quickly, and that was completely on me. Like I never felt cheated out of it. I never felt like unfairly treated from Scott. I agreed to a contract,
Sure,
and got that, and it was fine. So all the money that I spend on the development since then. So the money that I spent on Evergreen and Arcade and MyPOPGOES and even my original event, my ventures on other fanverse stuff potentially, comes from the money that I make from selling the games and the merch. So I think it's important to clarify that again, I'm not on a payroll. No one on the fanverse is being paid to make the games. They are paid when they sell the games.
Yeah.
So they get a cut. So that's, I think, it's something very important. I think people need to just remind themselves.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why games coming out before the main game and also like merchandise coming out before is so important. People give
so I make money.
Yeah,
I need money.
People need money. I mean, people give even companies like Glitch Productions who make Major Digital Circus. They'll give them flack for like, oh, every episode you come out with 6 plushies. It's like, yeah, we got to pay for the animation. Like, what do you want? What do you want?
You can watch the animation for free. You can play these games. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very important. We live in a capitalist hellhole. We got to survive in it.
Yeah. This is the 6th year working on Evergreen, and I have a team of like 20 people. Yeah. I don't know where these people think I get the money. I think these people do think that I'm paid by Scott to pay these people. It's not true. Yeah, I have to make money somehow, and merchandise is a fantastic opportunity. I've never really understood the complaint about merchandise because it's not a fundraiser. It's
you get
product.
something.
You get the product. I never understood it. Like when people get frustrated, like, oh, you keep focusing on merch, or you keep making so much merch. What's the issue? If you don't want the merch, don't buy it. If you do spend money on the merch, you get a physical product. Even if Evergreen was cancelled, like the POPGOES pin sets were not like a Kickstarter reward for a product. That is the product. That's not going to disappear. It's not going to like fade to ash in your house once if Evergreen is cancelled. I never understood it. It was so strange. But yeah, exactly. We have to make money somehow, and these side games. I hesitate to call Arcade and MyPOPGOES spin-off games because, in my opinion, POPGOES never had a genre. Because the first POPGOES game we released was an RPG game. I know that people consider the main POPGOES game, POPGOES 2016, that's the horror game. I understand. I'm not gonna debate that's not the main game. Of course it is, sure. But we have POPGOES Arcade, which is an RPG. We have POPGOES Arcade 2, which is an RPG. We have POPGOES Finale, which is a platformer like RPG game. We have POPGOES Arcade 2020, which is an RPG game. We have MyPOPGOES, which is a minigame collection. And then we have Evergreen, which is a horror game. Like I totally understand that some people don't care about these other non-horror games because FNAF is a horror game. Sure. But if, for example, Day Shift at Freddy's or F-Boys, if I just said F-Boys were added to the Fanverse, would none of them be main games because none of them are horror games?
Right.
I don't think so. I think they would be main games because they are in their own genre. Yeah. The Day Shift at Freddy's games are like visual novels, right? They're like these. I think they're visual novels.
Yeah, that's probably the closest approximation to a genre we could give them.
Yeah,
I don't know what else you could call them.
Exactly, but because they're all that genre, they are not spin-offs. So it's just like if we never released, if POPGOES 2016 was never a horror survival game. And it was also an RPG somehow. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense. But if it was, I guess there would be fewer complaints because even though they're the same product, they're the same projects. Like Arcade 2020 and MyPOPGOES, some people consider them to be these optional side games, but they're not. They are literally like the main chapters. Chapter 1 is Arcade, Chapter 2 is MyPOPGOES, and then Chapter 3 is Evergreen. You kind of, I don't know if you need to play them, but you kind of need to play them. Yeah, they're kind of like main prologues, like main entries in the story of the reboot. But some people, I don't know. I don't like to call them spin-offs, but I understand they're spin-offs in the terms of like they're not horror games, and some people consider the horror games to be the main entries. But sure. I don't know. That's how I see it.
All right. Well, yeah, I think we've covered just about everything we can. So once again. Thank you for coming on. This has been, like you said, like we both said, it's been a long time coming. It's been something that I've been looking forward to. And we kind of already did there. Is there anything else you wanted to say? So I guess all that's left to say is thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was lots of fun. It's great to get some information out there and to discuss stuff and hopefully get some more eyes on MyPOPGOES on mobile. Hopefully. Because that game has been received very well, but it hasn't been selling very well. We'll see. I mean, we recently had a push from the Spanish-speaking community, which did help. There was a pretty major push to make memes to promote the game, and I had a significant bump in the sales, which was fantastic. But we'll see. We're trying to do some more promotional material. I guess this interview is one of those examples, but also maybe some more trailers and stuff. But before we go, like I said, I do have an exclusive image.
Yeah.
We've recently been revealing or releasing, some wallpapers, some teasers for Evergreen that have aura. That's the thing. We initially released a long time ago, years ago, a wallpaper of Stone the Crow in the rain. And people have considered it to be like the best teaser for Evergreen. They think it's really cool. And since then, a lot of the teasers and the wallpapers are released. I've had complaints from people, from friends, from feedback people who've said like, these wallpapers are good, but they just don't capture the aura of the original Stone teaser. So since then, I've teamed up with someone called DerpMe. DerpMe is a animator. He does I think he's worked with Dorco on some music videos. He also does do some UI design for Evergreen. But I was like, hey, I think I need you because you're very good at framing images. You're very good.
We need an aura farmer.
Exactly. We need someone who can synthesize aura in a lab. He's done so far 2. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but some people might. You might be able to get some images up with this. But we've got one of POPGOES in the arcade room where he's kind of in this creepy pose in like a very green picture.
Yes, yeah.
And then later, I think a month later, or maybe later on, I think these are both October. Later in that month, I think we had a Force BB one where he's reaching out to the camera. Again, it's a very distorted, very cinematic image. And I'm going to give you the third. And
I'm
it
ready
is
for
a
the aura.
it's a actual remake of the Stone Rain one. And it's like another big old wallpaper. Also aura, hopefully.
That
And I
is
really hope people like it. Yeah.
That is very good.
Thank you very
Like
much. Yeah.
I mean, you're right about the cinematography of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll send you the POPGOES and the BB ones, just because you have some context. I'm sure you were googling, but here's the other two. So yeah, Dopamine is an absolute chef. He knows what he's doing with these. They're great. Of course, these don't necessarily represent how the game looks. There are a lot of post processing here that we can't really do in ClickTeam. But
Well, yeah, but it's showing off bits of the game with that like little bit of cinematography with it. Yeah, exactly.
It's the atmosphere that's captured pretty well. I mean, these really are characters that you see in the game, and these really are environments you see in the game. So yeah, but they're very cool wallpapers that people can put on their desktops or whatever. But yeah, there you go. You can premiere that one, and then I'll repost it on whenever you share it. But I hope you like it. I hope people like it. It's cool. It's a nice.
I mean, I'll tell you, I like it. I'll tell you that. I mean, I haven't like I clicked around, but I'm immediately pulling it back up again.
Very good. Yes, thank you, Dopamine, for that, and everyone who works on the Evergreen team, of course. Shout out to those.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I don't have words at this point, but like I said, all the links in the description for MyPOPGOES and Arcade and all that, so make sure to go check those out. But yeah, no, this has been wonderful. Thank you for being on, and obviously thank you for this treat that you've provided.
No, anytime. It's fun. Hope we can do it again at some point. Maybe when
for
something
sure.
else is released, so we can talk about that or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do have more stuff coming. There is, like I said, I'm trying to stay a little more quiet on Evergreen progress, but we will have some things to show. Hopefully in the coming months or so. But yeah, no, it's been great. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for being on, and again. And thank you for being here for the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. Hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye, everyone.